Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning,
Good
good
morning.
afternoon, wherever you're joining from. It is cross-Atlantic. We call it a transatlantic, we're calling it. So I think we have some different time zones here. Welcome, everyone. I think we just go ahead and slowly get started as people roll in. And yeah, they'll catch pieces if they come in later as well. So really nice to have you all here today. I know there's busy schedules, so we're gonna try to make it as fun, interactive, give you some interesting stories that you can learn and take away something from today. And I do encourage, of course, if you have any questions, write them in the chat, interact, get involved. Feel free to turn on your cameras, ask questions, all of that good stuff. I want to make sure that it's useful for you and it's not just, us talking to a blank slate, let's say. So with that, my name is Tamlin Shimizu. I'm the Global Partnerships and Communications Lead at Babel. I see some familiar faces and names as well, but if you don't know me yet, really nice to meet you. I will be your host today, and so I get the chance of talking to these amazing panelists we have and getting all their insights. And today, the topic that we're exploring is really around public-private partnerships and how AI are reshaping infrastructure, driving resilience, and ensuring inclusive growth. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just while we talk a lot in Europe, we're also getting more and more global with our approach and getting more insights. So we also have some friends here from the US. To share their insights and what's going on that side, and also interested to hear from any of the audience where you're coming in from today. If you feel so inclined to, feel free to shoot now, go into the chat, introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming in from today. I'm always very curious to see how many corners of the world that we can get into. So good. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guests today. So first up, I have Richard he's the former mayor of Aurora, Illinois, and Michael as well. He's the former CIO of Aurora, Illinois. And I think you guys have a fun fact in mind about Aurora to give people a little bit more insight to introduce yourselves. I believe it's called the City of Lights. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us why it's called the City of Lights? You're on mute.
Good to see you, everybody. Thank you for having us on, Tamlin, and welcome us to participate in this podcast. Absolutely, Aurora is called. My name is Richard Irvin. I'm the 59th mayor of Aurora. I was a two-term mayor of the city, 4-year term, so 8 years total. And before that, I was an alderman, city council person for 10 years prior to that. And yes, fun fact, the city of Aurora, it's called the City of Lights because we were the first city in the United States, one of the first cities in the United States to have electric street lamps back in the 1800s. We got rid of the candles and the gas kind of early on and went to electricity, and they called it the City of Lights, and we're still glowing today.
Already innovating quite early on, and I think taking that spirit still with you today. Mike, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself too?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Piggies. I'm the former Chief Information Officer of the City of Aurora from 2017 to 2018, over the last 8 years. And now I'm actually the president of Aurora Dynamics Solutions, which is a consulting company for technology and digital transformation, which Richard and I are partners.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Now I'd love to introduce you to Mimi. She's coming in from the Netherlands. She's an energy transition strategy. She works on energy transition strategy for the city of Amsterdam. Mimi, do you have any kind of fact that you want to bring about Amsterdam? I think everybody knows Amsterdam, but maybe something they don't know yet.
Let's get a poll on that one, because in my experience, not everyone, everyone knows Amsterdam, but not necessarily knows where it is located in Europe. So it is located close to the sea, the North Sea, which is a sort of sub-boundary before the Atlantic Ocean. And one of the fun facts is that we are actually located as a whole country in a sinking delta. So that means that we're sinking because of the weight of sediment that's loaded upon us. And we're trying to keep up to speed to keep the water at bay, at least underneath our feet instead of over it. And we're very good at that. And this year, the city of Amsterdam has been existing for 750 years. And in those almost millennium, we're heading towards the first millennium, we managed to keep up with the rising water levels with at least 3 meters of piling up human measures to keep up to speed. So that's really a fun fact from Amsterdam. We're doing quite well, so we're really confident that we can keep up that speed.
Thanks so much, Mimi. I'm really interested to also hear the case study that you brought. Excuse me. Now we move on to Adrian. Adrian, he's the Innovation Commissioner for Innovation City Belfast. I think you also have something interesting to share from Belfast.
Yeah. Thanks, Tamil, and thanks for asking me to participate on this session. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever anyone's from. I didn't actually remember until I looked at my background that just over my left-hand shoulder is actually the dry dock where Titanic left to go transatlantic to the US, right? So that's not my fun fact though, and depending on the age of I told my wife this and she said, "Are you sure you know the age of the participants on the call?" But anybody that knows Ireland knows that it's well known for its heritage and culture and music. And Belfast is no different. And one real fun fact that about Belfast, it was awarded UNESCO City of Music in 2021. But back in 1971, March 1971, Led Zeppelin debuted the Stairway to Heaven in the Ulster Hall here in Belfast for the first time publicly. And of course, they and that song went on to be a huge global hit and one of the rock anthems of all time. So yeah, very proud of a lot of our stuff and here, including our cultural heritage here.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, good. So now hopefully you already learned a little something new from those introductions. Now I want to slide. Oh yes, I forgot to say this is me, by the way, when I introduced myself. But now we already want to go into our case study. So how we're going to roll today is that each of the panelists, they're going to present a little short story, something interesting that they brought along today, and then we're going to have a little mini discussion around that. And then we'll go into the next one. We'll have a little mini discussion around that. We'll go to the next one, mini discussion. And then we'll have a few more in-depth questions to do in the panel. As I mentioned, I'm happy to have you add also questions in the chat or any other fun facts about you, your cities, anything like that. I already saw that Michelle said, Adrian, that she's just down the road from you. So some neighbors also in the call. With that, I'd love to give the floor over to Richard to start us off strong from the US. Tell us the story that you brought with you today.
All right, so our plan, we had a formula in Aurora that we like to implement, and it was an acronym. The acronym is SEEC, Safety, Education, and Economy. And if we focus on, having a strong and safe community, no one wants to live in a community that's not safe. No one wants to live in a community that doesn't provide good education for their young people, for their children. And no one wants to live in a community that doesn't provide economic strength or jobs and opportunities for the future. So SEE, because it's so clear. Now, the one we focused on, in the first 4 years of my administration was the economic portion. And in the 8 years I was mayor, and I'll count out, say 7 years, because take COVID out for that 1 year where we were all shut down. In those 7 years that I was mayor, we did more economic development in those 7 years than in the 70 years prior to me, with all the mayors put together collectively. And that's because we brought excitement and energy back. One of the things that we focused on, particularly this case study, was the data centers boom that is happening in the United States, in the Chicagoland area specifically. We have a number of data centers in the city. One particular Cyrus One, which is a data center company known worldwide, wanted to build a data center. Now, anyone knows, a mayor, any city administrator, city manager knows a data center is the gift that keeps on giving. They pay property taxes they pay utility taxes, and then the money for permitting to build this data center. And there's not a lot of truck traffic, not a lot of not a lot of anything other than revenue coming in. However, there's a particular situation where this data center, and let me just back up a little bit. Aurora was primed to have data centers and IT centers built because we had a very impressive fiber optic network, 150 square miles with the offshoots, about 300 square miles, and we're consistently expanding. So easy access and communications very, very quickly. So the data center wanted to move to an area specifically that we said we didn't want any particular data centers. We wanted to leave it for retail and hotels and food and beverage and things like that. However, we recognized the value of this data center, and having a meeting with them and our city council, most people were against it based on the fact that we had that area set aside for something other than the data center type business. However, in a meeting, CyrusOne asked the question, what's this worth to you? This is a public-private partnership, they're calling this. What's it worth to you? So, of course, my people were like, it's not worth anything to us. We want to leave it, zoned as it is. We don't want to change the zoning. But I recognize the value of it. And I said, what difference does it make where we build hotels and restaurants as long as we build them? So if we have the money that we need to buy other property that might even be more conducive in a better location, then why don't we see what it's worth to them? We negotiated $16 million from CyrusOne, and they didn't blink when we asked for that. They didn't even blink, recognizing how much revenue was coming in from data centers, from the trading that happens in the milliseconds. So in this public-private partnership that we built, they were able to build a data center, give the city of Aurora $16 million that we could use for economic development anywhere in our city that we chose to, and build on our fiber optic network. So it was a win-win for Aurora. We got dollars, we got expansion of our fiber optic network, and we got a data center that is a tax boon in the city of Aurora. And Mike Piggies, the former CIO of Aurora, was one that helped to expand our fiber optic network to make us this prime location for data centers and IT companies to want to relocate. Matter of fact, we created what's called the IT corridor in that very area because of our strong fiber optic network.
Thanks so much, Richard. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything to add to that, or if you think Richard covered all the bases.
Well, I mean, it's always you're kind of a bad idea to follow Richard. So, but I mean, he pretty much laid it out. I think one of the big things from an IT perspective, as Richard mentioned, and then I just want to think about the people on the call. We have basically about over 210 kilometers of municipal fiber optic network. That's the proximity to our Interstate 88 made it an ideal location for these hyperscale data center infrastructure. And that's just one of the data centers. I believe they have 2 campuses, and they're building a third for the CyrusOne. And there's the Edge data center, which is across the street as well, which, I mean, the impact of that actually solidified Aurora's role in the whole Chicagoland AI, I'm going to say data center economy, because it's basically attracting cloud providers, it's attracting fintech companies, it's attracting enterprise clients, right? And creating hundreds of construction and tech jobs, in that ancillary effect. And it's also positioned Aurora as a model for mid-sized cities, leveraging digital infrastructure and also looking for that long-term economic gain for those AI players and providers as well. I mean, Aurora is definitely up and coming. I think it's a hidden gem, and we have to remember kind of the strategic location of Aurora it's the Midwest. You got the West Coast, you got the East Coast, and then you have the Southwest, like the Austin area and things like that. But Chicagoland area is the hub. Every connection, every internet connection comes through at some point the city of Chicago or Chicagoland area. Right? And it's a prime location for high frequency trading as well, and cloud providers. And also there are major projects going on with the Department of Energy for the Aurora supercomputer, which is a hyperscale AI platform, data centers as well, which created a huge buzz within the Chicagoland area as well.
And there was a
Yeah.
question that was asked, do we own our fiber
Yes.
network? Yes, we do. City of Aurora does own its fiber optic network.
Yeah, thanks so much. I actually want to ask now to have a little bit more of a discussion on this at all. Maybe with Adrian and Mimi, how do you see this like parallel in your universe within Europe, what they're describing? Can you maybe shed some light on that?
Yeah, I find that absolutely fascinating because in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland government funded what was called Project Kelvin, which provided exactly the same thing. And I just had a quick look at the Project Kelvin map, and it's a submarine fiber optic cable that runs from Northern Ireland to North America and goes directly to Chicago. So I think we're probably better connected than we actually understood before we came on the call. And in fact, that high speed connectivity and speed of transaction has also made Belfast a hub in Europe and the UK for financial services and fintech and regulatory technology capability. So it mirrors exactly what the team in Aurora is saying. What we're also seeing in the UK very quickly at the moment is the UK government are putting huge amount of investment into UK artificial intelligence growth zones, trying to drive sovereign capability around hyperscale data centers, huge amount of investment. That's about £2 billion of investment between now and 2030. So the connectivity is there, but it's not just about the investment in data centers, it's about the grid infrastructure investment that they're looking at as well. So upgrading that hardware infrastructure to 500 megawatt plus investment for grid infrastructure to drive more densification around hyperscale data centers. And what that looks to do is very similar to what the Aurora team said, unlock about 30, for example, in the northeast of England, it will unlock £30 billion of private investment around their key growth sectors in health and life sciences and advanced manufacturing in the northeast. So mirrors exactly what the Aurora team were saying, and seeing something huge investment in the UK in that space.
Thanks, Adrian. What about from your perspective, Mimi?
Yeah, I am very interested to hear those stories because as Amsterdam, we're actually, I'm almost feeling a bit getting flushed because of the perspective that we were or are one of the leading Western Europe cities on data centers for decades. We have over 40 data centers in our city. And quite recently, we have been not very successful in pointing out the economic contribution of data center industry towards the economy of the country. So the general perception of the public is that data centers are merely there because of our enormous hunger for data and Netflixing and AI, instead of securing or part of our necessary infrastructure. So we have over 3 decades of data center connectivity, high-speed connectivity around Amsterdam, together with Frankfurt, London, and Paris, so-called flap cities. And we are having quite a hard time in attracting data centers and keeping them and demonstrating their value towards the city and the country of the Netherlands. So I'm quite interested. There's a couple of differences that are already pointed out. One of them is that the city isn't owner of the fiber optic network, so there is no direct combination of the actual benefits of data centers leading towards your local economy. And secondly, what the great value of data centers could be is that you can actually share the electricity connections if you're in a highly densely populated urban environment. And data centers, most of them are spreading out towards the rural areas because it's much easier to build and to put your renewable energy sources into place in order to power them. So what we're noticing from data centers is that they're spreading out towards the rural areas and basically making an impact into our landscape and not adding towards the public perception of what the great economic value could be.
Yeah, great insight from both of you. Thank you, and thanks Richard and Mike for sharing this story. if you have any parallels that you're seeing with your local context, feel free to pop that in the chat now as well. Any insights there too, I think would be amazing. With that, I would love to also to move on to you, Mimi, on the story that you've decided to bring today. What do you have for us?
It's actually part of the story that you have been started to go on the data centers. I'll take it from a bit of a different angle, but it comes down to the public perception and what role can data centers or vital infrastructure play in our country, because Amsterdam is basically a very big city in the Netherlands, which is a relatively small country. So just let's go to the city of Amsterdam. As I said before, it was located in the Netherlands. And thanks for sharing the map, Adrian, because you see there the flap cities, as we call them, Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, and Paris, which are the interconnected high connectivity network cities. And we've been in that position for decades now. We have over 40 data centers up and running in our city, each of them accountable or capable of providing power towards the city equivalent of 100,000 inhabitants. So just imagine the city of Amsterdam, over close to 1 million people are living there or trying to make a living. And we are having it within our boundaries over 40 data centers times 100,000. So an extra 4 million potential power supply grids lying there. That's being used for data pumping around. Good. Amsterdam is located in a delta together with the rest of the Netherlands. And that means that water is coming. And whatever happens within the Netherlands is that we know for sure the water is going to come either from the rivers and from the melting glaciers that provides sediments towards a sinking delta, or from the sea where the level is rising and rising and rising. And we need to keep up with that water. As I proposed in my fun fact, it's really quite easy. At least as a Dutch people, we're very confident that we're able to keeping up with that water because we've been able to do so the past 750 years. So why not do that again? Well, simply it's going to be quite a tough challenge because the speed of water rising and water flooding is increasing with a rapid speed. So it's going to be a real challenge to keep up and keep our city resilient. So when we're talking about data centers and the use of AI, it's really about resilience. It's really about what is our response time in times of crisis, and how are we using AI or data centers or digital and vital infrastructure in order to help us to regain our infrastructures up and running in case we get hit by either the water or a different crisis. And there it comes down to how can we get into contact, reaching out to our citizens so that in case of a crisis, they are actually able to work together very fast and rebuild the infrastructure, the communication infrastructure, your digital infrastructure, your energy infrastructure within 24 hours to be up and running again. And there is where it becomes really interesting because on the one hand, because of this digital infrastructure, you have a lot of backup possibilities, enormous amount of backup possibilities, which are already in place and within the incorporation or the working together with the data center industry, you're very quickly and easily up and running or can be up and running again. So you're in a good position in case of any crisis that might hit you. But on the other hand, we're looking towards ways of engaging with the citizens without using the digital route, because only up to 80% of the people is really being reached in a digital way. And therefore, we're investigating ways of our water infrastructure, where we're taking ownership again of the people in the neighborhood, where they can settle up their dikes, their water protection measures, and signaling each other manually, visually, in order that their area is secured and you're back and up and running again. And here comes a really fascinating scenario, because on the one hand, we're using the data connectivity and data center industry in order to model our scenarios, what could happen. And on the other side, we're trying to think of ways how you can engage or mobilize over 1 million people in a very rapid time frame in case your whole digital infrastructure has been shut down. So this is the part of what we're struggling with. As I said before on the Aurora case, as Amsterdam, we have a very hard time making visible what is the economic value of the data center industry towards our country. The investments with the data center industry are up to 1 billion per year, and we're not managing good enough to get the revenues out of that into our society. So that's a real challenge. And the public perception is not very positive towards data centers, because there's a misconception understanding of what data centers can do for us as a resilience, increasing the resilience of the city, and what their actually contribution to society is. So a different story.
Yeah, and a really, really important one based on, how do we engage citizens? How do we get them actively involved? So I want to kind of pose that to the group as well. What have you guys seen? How can citizens be more actively involved? How can they understand the benefits of data centers and also, yeah, engage more along those lines? Mike, you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go back, and I know Richard can also piggyback off this, going back to his acronyms, SEE, and I'm going to that first one of economy, right? When data centers are involved, they create jobs, right? Hundreds and thousands of
Mm,
jobs, right? Which has a positive impact on the community. Now, if we go back to that and we look at, here in the Chicagoland area, and we think about that, Aurora's just, was the second largest city in the state of Illinois outside of Chicago. But right now, there's a very ambitious project or initiative. It's called the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park, which is actually being anchored by Psi Quantum. Psi Quantum is I think it's a Palo Alto-based company, and they're looking to build the first US-based, utility scale fault tolerance quantum computer, and they're going to do it at this particular site. It's actually the site is on the I think it's on the south side of Chicago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard. And it's backed by the city of Chicago and also the state of Illinois. Yeah, it's basically stationed at the former U.S. Steel South Works site on Chicago's southeast side. And it's right there in its prime lakefront redevelopment. But what they're designing is a multi-billion-dollar quantum and data technology campus, and it's integrating research, workforce development, and also commercial innovation. And I believe the site is over 300,000 square feet. And back to the point, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's bringing the reports that I read that is bringing over 150 jobs in the first 5 years, right? That $1 billion investment is creating jobs that impact the economy, right? And again, the key word is that's how, citizens and businesses and everyone gets involved when it starts to create jobs and starts to uplift the economy. There is a transatlantic piece, I think, that is actually, how I say, relevant as well. But before I jump to that, Richard, did you have anything you want to add in there with regards to the economy piece?
Absolutely. And I think it's important always to educate your community, because if we don't educate them and paint our own narrative, we'll have the naysayers or cave people, citizens against virtually everything. That's an acronym, citizens against virtually the cave people. They'll paint the narrative for you. I won't tell you that, everybody, in Aurora, Chicagoland area loves data centers. As a matter of fact, the naysayers make it seem like data centers are evil things. But those same people, they use cell phones, they use computers. The cloud is not a real cloud. It's a data center. You say things are in the cloud. It's not some cloud sitting in the sky. It's some place that holds computers, and make sure that you're able to use the technology that we're all reliant on. So it's just about educating and painting our own narrative. And sometimes that takes a marketing program coming from the city to let people know the value. And I'm not sure how, it works with taxing businesses in the Netherlands. But, in the United States, specifically in Illinois, we have property taxes that they have to pay, utility taxes for using all the energy that they use that we share with them as a municipality, as well as the jobs. And if, let's say, we didn't have any data centers in the area, and the folks still had to put things in the cloud, that means the person that would pay their average telephone bill that might cost $100, a month would have to, pay a whole lot more because, a data center would have to be, data center is going to have to be online, but it'd have to be online somewhere else. And it costs people more money just to pay, for their simple telephone bill. People don't understand that. They just take things for granted. Like it's like our phone just automatically worked. We automatically are to save our pictures in the cloud and all of our data in computers, but it all goes somewhere and it goes to these data centers. And when we start talking about AI and the use of it in the future, we need even more data centers to provide what we as consumers start to come to rely on.
Right.
I think sorry, Mike, I think I saw Mimi kind of react to something that you said. Did you want to jump in there, Mimi, at all?
Just want to clarify a couple of numbers because I understand your story completely. And of course, that what's been happening, like what is the value and making it visible. But as I understood it, you're creating 150 jobs for a $1 billion investment, or is that
The
wrongly
initial
understood?
ones. And again, I'm trying to recall a lot of this off of memory as well. That's just like one aspect. But again, there's also a lot of ancillary services that are being created and additional jobs being brought that is not calculated in that as well. So
And what we're concerned about as a city of Amsterdam is the general public perception is really about the energy use and the water usage of the
yeah,
data centers, of the data streams. And basically, I don't know exactly, it's not the law of Murphy, but basically the data center industry is innovating so rapidly that you don't need more data center because they're becoming denser and denser and denser and more efficient all the time. So they're really keeping up to speed with
yeah,
the growth of the data traffic that's going across it.
right.
But the real concern is that you're becoming extremely vulnerable because your digital infrastructure is becoming one of your vital infrastructures.
Mhm.
And the larger public is not fully aware of that. And I'm really becoming concerned when I saw the picture of like the transatlantic cable that's laying out there. Because at the moment, we're concerned of who's surfing the waters. And we're extremely vulnerable. What happens if your cable goes down? For example, there's great things happening, but if your cable goes down for whatever reason, what kind of time do you have, and can you take as a city to get your vital infrastructure up and running? And that's where our real concern at the moment is. How do we get that in the right spot? And how can we mobilize? So we're using AI for the scenarios because that's really helping you to get out of the box and do the digital twinning and the whole modeling that comes with it. But the real question is, how do we get our city up and running in case of a crisis
Hmm.
within 24
I
hours?
mean,
Because it's going to be anarchy. We had a 2-hour outing because of the financial pinning infrastructure couldn't be used anymore. And it was solved after 2 hours, but I was getting really nervous and understanding that, okay, within 24 hours, you have a looting, you have a
yeah.
serious crisis.
I mean, in those particular cases at a municipal level, I mean, we had what we call COOP, COOP, which basically means continuity of operations plan. If that fiber optic cable goes down, what's the backup? If that backup goes down, what's the backup of that? So forth and so on. So they build in that continuity and that actually resiliency. And again, back to your point about the transatlantic cable, these aren't new cables. These cables have been there for the last half a century. And I'm sure that there are backup lines. I don't have the map in front of me, but I think Adrian probably could also solidify what I'm saying. Those cables, there is redundancy built, in the different paths, that actually cross the transatlantic sea. And I just want to go back and also say that I actually stand mistaken. I believe the numbers that I originally had was like 150 jobs that were initially created, but it's my understanding that, the estimates is thousands of jobs as well. So I just wanted to go back and to create that, or to correct that. But also going back to the whole point about the people and, the economy piece. That whole AI piece around education and workforce training. I think that, there's a lot of partners that are going to be working in that initiative. And I think one of the big one in, and if I'm not mistaken, I think NVIDIA is actually investing heavily in a lot of US based kind of chip production and supercomputer infrastructure. And it's my understanding, and I see a few of the partners that are online, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there's rumors that NVIDIA, that they're looking to build their quantum campus on that South Side campus as well as part of that quantum microelectronics park. But again, if you think about that, this positions Chicago as basically a transatlantic node for quantum AI convergence, which will then specifically attract European research institutes and tech firms seeking that collaboration. And I think that's what we're talking about. And again, going back to what you said, Mimi, in terms of, the data centers, they're so large now, but with, the partners and like NVIDIA thing, they're looking to basically to scale those down. And that's the whole thing with quantum, right? And to basically have those scalable compute hubs, powering, all of this technology, data centers, and, these different applications and systems that we're using that are deployed here in the United States and across Europe. So, these hubs will actually serve as kind of cross-border kind of models and training hubs and federated learning and shared service centers to kind of support this whole kind of global economy as we kind of move forward in this particular space.
And you
Yeah,
let me just jump. Go ahead.
Sorry, we have to move on because I want to make sure to give space for Adrian to share his story before we get too late. I love the discussion, and I promise also, Gianluca, I see your question also in the chat. We're going to get to it right after we go through Adrian's story as well. I just don't want to leave him out to dry, let's say.
Okay.
So, Adrian, please tell us what you have for us today.
Yeah, you're okay, and it's actually quite relevant. If I could just pick up really quickly on some of the points that Mimi highlighted, if that's okay, Tama, because it's relevant. But we've actually had the exact same type of conversation in Belfast around data centers. The economics don't stand up, right, in terms of job creation from the civic society perspective, doesn't stand up. But what we've been looking at is if we were to be developing any data centers in Belfast, what is the heat recovery opportunities, right? We look at what the citizen need is, right? And the citizen need is effectively by the cost of energy, right? That's what's driving the big aspect for us. So can we be looking at heat recovery networks, for example, from data centers and how it could support citizens, underrepresented communities, areas of social deprivation in terms of heating costs. The other thing that I quickly say, and I'm happy to pick up on some of this, is can you then use the data center not as a data center, but looking at the efficiency of AI, the energy consumption of AI, the energy consumption of technology, and then also can you look at, for example, smart city tariff monitoring, right, around if you're generating data from a data center with renewable sources, can you be looking at then variable tariffing of energy within a city for citizens to use, right? So the data center being there drives down energy costs, right? That changes the perception then of citizens of what a data center might be. It won't be the economics of it, but it has dual role where it can play a real transition to sustainability and net zero from that perspective, and then drive down the cost of living. So that just wanted to touch on that very quickly, if that was okay. So the reason that I can say that is actually the image behind me on my screen is Belfast Harbour Estate. And on that estate, we have what I report to as the commissioner is called the Innovation City Belfast Partnership. And it's the 7 anchor institutions of Belfast, or predominantly Northern Ireland, providing everything, if you think of a cluster, everything that's relevant to an innovation ecosystem. So members of that partnership are Belfast City Council from civic leadership, Catalyst, that you can just see here, which is our entrepreneurial ecosystem, supporting entrepreneurs, 1,000 entrepreneurs every year to establish startup businesses and scale them. Belfast Harbour, which you can see there, which is about 25% of the landmass of Belfast. and has its own bylaws, has its own infrastructure, can be used as a test bed for exactly that, deploying data centers and looking at what can be done in that space. The academic institutions of Ulster University and Queen's University Belfast, so looking at research and innovation excellence, and then Belfast Metropolitan College, which is looking at the skills and talent and employability pathway for all stages of education, if you like, from community college right through to universities, if you want to look at it that way. We're really fortunate because Belfast region has £1 billion of investment, which is co-investment between the UK government, the Northern Ireland Executive Government and industry over the next 10 years. It looks at public-private partnership projects in everything from tourism to skills and employability, to infrastructure, right through to research and innovation partnerships. And there's about £350 million of that investment, which is specifically for capital builds around centres of excellence. So the research from our academic institutions can be harnessed within these centres of excellence around advanced manufacturing, health and life sciences, predominantly focused on medtech, biotech, and data systems. And the reason being, very similar to what Mike had said earlier, is that we're underpinned, our economy is underpinned from strengths in digital systems, AI, and cybersecurity and wireless technology. Actually, again, in one of the research centres just over my shoulder is where all of that activity happens in one clustered environment. The investments overseen by the Innovation City Belfast Partnership, I'm responsible for £120 million of innovation funds for digital innovation that drives a lot of that sort of co-investment between private sector and public sector investments. So we can attract, for example, with a £50 million investment in 5G and future wireless infrastructure, the investments from the Ericssons, the Verizons, the BTs, that sort of into the region. One of the ways that we've seen that really come to fruition, and just to talk about the Belfast Harbour, is through a project called Harlander. And the Harlander project is an additional £11 million investment by UK government, where we were able to bring small to medium enterprise companies, startups, infrastructure partners, transport partners together to deliver the evidence and actually the test environment on the Belfast Harbour estate for commercial autonomous services. Right. So if you think about transport and sustainability and autonomy and linking citizens to these kind of innovation assets and commercial assets, the importance is around mobility and how can we do that in an autonomous way. We were able to combine a lot of the investments from 5G private networks, and that was a partnership between Belfast City Council, UK government and Belfast Harbour itself, along with British Telecom in the UK. We were able to bring in smart systems integration and then road infrastructure, looking at the transition of that road infrastructure in cooperation with Translink, which is the Northern Ireland body for the transport systems, the fully integrated transport systems for Northern Ireland. So what we did then was the ability to, and this might be of interest based on the previous conversation, was attract £16 million of investment from UK government for a national digital twin centre in Belfast, in partnership with Digital Catapult, which again is a UK government initiative. But it allows then small businesses, public sector partners to access multi-million pounds digital twinning capability at low cost. So you can model the changes in your grid infrastructure or your transport infrastructure, or your smart systems, and that attracts that private investment to look at, okay, where would my investment go? What impact would it have within a city? And indeed, Mimi, it might be something very similar to what you're talking about around being able to digitally twin what might happen in that scenario and how you could plan for that. So that's how those investments have layered on top of each other, using that public sector investment around a city and growth deal to allow us to build upon that. Building all that capability is what's important. I think the part that I'd spoken to you about previously, I think, Tamlin, was, we've got the centres of excellence. The importance for us is, and anybody that's in software systems knows this, not every pilot's scalable, right? You always hit some sort of barriers. So what's the point in building this infrastructure if you can't scale it because you haven't built the right roads, grid infrastructure, water infrastructure, all of the public services that are required if you've got this innovation ecosystem? So we're trying to bring those two things together in a more innovative way as well, so we can inform policy and government investments in the long term. So maybe stop there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adrian. I love how you're bringing that together. I think you called it to me a Ferrari on a bumpy road, right? Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that metaphor?
Yeah. It's back to like how explaining this. Interestingly, when we say how do we bring citizens along, we also see. I think we're City of Aurora are very fortunate to have someone like Mike. I think, but we have to bring our politicians with us as well. And the point is, there's no point having a Ferrari if you've got a bumpy road and can't drive it, right? And that's kind of where we were heading, which was we were building all of this research capability. And we see this in many cities. We've seen this in Cambridge, UK. We saw it in Bangalore. We saw it in the San Francisco Bay Area. You rapidly scale an innovation ecosystem. You see huge industrialization that attracts more people to the region, but you don't have the infrastructure to support the housing, the roads, the transport, water, electricity, grid, etc. So it's that kind of metaphor. Yeah, you can have a Ferrari, but it's useless if you don't have the roads that you can build it on. So we need to make sure we invest in our infrastructure.
Yeah, that reminds me because I'm sitting in Germany, right? You can't like, why build the Autobahn? That's why they built you have the nice German cars, right? So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
yeah, the same idea. Mimi, I'm wondering if I feel like there were some points that he touched on that really overlapped with your story. Do you want to maybe elaborate on anything? Did anything that he say resonate with you? What are your thoughts there?
Couple of things. Basically, what's really resonating is you don't need a Ferrari if you just have a bumpy road to go on. So I was thinking, okay, in the Netherlands, we really need to look into our diving gear because the water is coming. So it's not about cars anymore. And we're still planning. And from the perspective of the city of Amsterdam, it's really a cooperation within the Delta cities. So Rotterdam is our biggest harbor, of course. And of course, we have a huge ecosystem around innovation and startups in the harbor of Amsterdam, but it's larger in the port of Rotterdam.
Mhm.
So, and that's also an internal Dutch competition. But on an international scale, we're really cooperating for the Netherlands as a whole, as a country, as a country scale. Um, what I'm thinking about over and over again is that Ferrari. We are looking towards the diving gear in the boat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
What is also triggering me is to what extent you can really reap the economic benefits of the data center industry or just the whole ecosystem depends a lot on your position as a city in the whole taxing scheme and the ownership scheme. Because with the investment of new data centers, we do have over, well, not billions, but billions are being invested, but we have over tens of millions of income because of the ground positions, the ownership positions, but we don't have the benefits because we don't, for example, own the fiber optic net. So it's really going to become a challenge how we cooperate further with the data center industry in order to keep up or restore the resilience of our city.
Yeah, absolutely. I promised Gianluca we get to his question. I think it was partially answered, or Mimi and Adrian, you kind of addressed it. But I wanted to make sure that we answered his question. So basically, he said in the chat, apologies that he can't talk because he has poor connectivity. But how do you cope with the enormous energy demand data centers generate and the enormous amount of heat they produce? Whoever ones feels like they should answer this. Mimi, I think you already replied a bit in the chat, but I don't know
I
if you want to
already
elaborate at
put
all.
down a couple of comments in the chat, but I definitely like to highlight on it. In Amsterdam, we have definitely described or researched what is the impact of the waste heat. And basically, there's two reasons why it's not really happening at a large scale, because there's more than enough data heat, as we call it, that we could use and incorporate into our energy system to warm the city or keep the citizens warm. It's not happening because the fossil alternatives are still more attractive economically and also sustainably on paper, at least, than the data heat. And the data heat, and that's a real technical issue, is very often at a relatively low temperature. So it requires lot of amount of energy in order to get it into the energy system that you're looking towards. District heating, for example.
Yeah. The rest of the question is about using wasted heat from data centers to heat buildings. He said.
That's what we've looked into.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, it can be technically very easily done, but it's not happening because of the business case. Drivers are not competing with alternatives.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to kind of the question around public-private partnerships. Maybe Richard, Mike, you might have some insight on this. How do you think AI is really reshaping the role of PPPs in infrastructure and economic growth?
Mike, I'll let you take that one.
Wow, that's a very interesting one. How they're reshaping. I mean, one of the things, I mean, I think we can take the example we're talking about right now about that transatlantic cooperation, because again, we're in a global economy. You're looking at, the fiber optic infrastructure to be used because people are, working from home a lot more and they're working globally. I can be working with Adrian on a project that might be, there in in Europe, but I'm sitting right here in Aurora. So looking at those different let's say initiatives and projects are you know use cases themselves, right? I mean, there's other projects that we're working on, probably, in the African continent, so, when these global projects start to emerge, you need to kind of set up these memorandum of understanding and these PPPs and these partnerships to be able to actually run them. So those are, I mean, two specific examples just right off the bat. And again, you need to, address those PPPs, I guess, in a different way that you would traditionally do if you're just physically local in a space, just working in Aurora, working in Amsterdam, and everyone is in those different locations, right? I mean, it's actually changing the way we work dramatically, you know. But
Yeah. It leads me to a question also. When we're thinking about these global perspectives right now, we're kind of taking US and EU examples, right? Um, what do you all think about what can US and EU cities learn from each other's models, and what should they just avoid copying at all costs? Um, Adrian, you want to take that? What are you taking from the US and what are you leaving?
Interesting. I suppose, I mean, I was just thinking about how's AI shaping PPPs is kind of quite relevant for what we're doing at the moment in Northern Ireland, in the sense that government budgets are quite constrained, they're quite tight. So there's a public sector transformation process going on across all sections of public service, from health and housing and energy. So there's a lot around data sharing, across departmental data sharing, and how you can be more innovative through the use of data in those public-private partnerships to look at innovation. And I mean, one of the things I said to you before, Tamlin, was I'm getting to the point, should we be looking at a NASA model of should the public sector innovation be actually provided to the private sector? Should we be looking at the agility that's needed? I think it's going to start to shape PPPs quite considerably that way, that the use of data and the use of technology for reform of public services is going to probably be outsourced, rather than trying to build up the capability within government departments. I think that's maybe something that, when you look at the US and you look at the way that the US federal government has looked at innovation in the past and how they've provided that to the private sector, I think it's a very interesting model and something that we should be looking at. It's not something that we do, but it's something that we should be looking at in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you guys over in the US? What do you think you can take from the EU?
Well, I think if there's someone's doing it right somewhere else, that we can always copy it and make sure, see if it works in our community as well. I'll say, as we're talking about fiber optic networks and data, especially when we have communities that don't own their fiber network, and have community that don't see the value of data centers. the economic value of data centers, we have to recognize that, our fiber network and our data is a utility. It's no longer something that we can say that, just people can, people have it just if they want to. It's like water. It's like, heat. It's like electricity. When people walk into a room and flip the switch, they don't think about how that, light works or where the electricity comes from. They just know the light works. It's the same with as we get to data and our fiber network and able to communicate across, the big pond. It's a utility. It's so recognizing it's a utility. We have to create those public-private partnerships because government ability to pay for things are limited. Our finances, are finite, and we only get a certain amount of money based on the taxes that come in every year. But we recognize that it's a utility and we need these services for our society, for our community. That's when we say, hey, all right, well, government, you've got to make a partnership with the private sector to make sure that our people can actually get it. And we saw that over COVID, firsthand, where folks that didn't have access to, high-speed internet or the internet at all were hurt substantially. And we realized this isn't something that we can just, say that, the rich people or the people that decide they want it, should have access to it. Everyone needs access to it. And the only way that happens is if you have a public-private partnership with the private sector in data.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, one of the biggest things, at least from my perspective, that we can take from our cohorts over the pond is probably around governance, but specifically like GDPR, right? I think, the United States looking to harmonize the way we do things. I think we're definitely behind. I would say it's probably like a decade behind in the policy around GDPR. And I think, having this transatlantic collaboration can help us kind of bridge those frameworks around this, PII, and also using AI for good, basically standardizing, these different policies, to help, enhance data privacy or cybersecurity or, like Mimi's talking about the risk mitigation piece as well for cities and, regions and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Mimi, close us out. We're in the last minute. I want to hear from you. What are you taking away with you today?
Well, I'm taking away with me, apart from the Ferrari, the diving gear, and I'm also taking away, I am extremely concerned because data is part of our vital infrastructure. Like you said, Richard, it needs to be accessible by anyone, any moment. And from the Netherlands, City of Amsterdam is definitely not per se a believer in towards sharing with PPP constructions because it is vital infrastructure. And therefore, we need to organize it in such a way that it can be accessible in all ways. And that can be done together. But your accessibility, it's part of your vital infrastructure. And that's becoming more and more relevant in times of crisis. Yeah.
It's no longer a luxury. It's now a necessity.
It's absolutely a necessity in order to safely live.
Yeah.
Very, very well said, all of you. This has been a really insightful conversation. I'm really glad that I got to take part in it. So thank you so much for allowing me to be your host today. Of course, if anybody has any further questions or want to engage with any of us, feel free to reach out to me. We'll also send, of course, the recording across for everyone to view as well afterwards. So thank you to our wonderful panelists. You were a wealth of information, insight, and great storytellers as well. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
for having
Tamara. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Good to be on with y'all. Bye now.
Feel free to reach out.